Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for Township of Georgian Bay on March 7, 2025. I hereby call the meeting to order at 10 o'clock a.m. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are working on the lands traditionally occupied by the Indigenous peoples. Indigenous people continue to care for this land and continue to shape our township. We show our respect and will continually honor the treaties that were signed as we consider our decisions and actions. I would ask the members in attendance and online, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, I have a motion moved by Member Predko, seconded by Member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes of February the 7th, 2025 as circulated. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for 4 minor variance applications. If you wish to be notified of the decisions of the applications on the agenda this morning, please add your name to the contact list that's on the table there with the pen. Or if you are online, you can send your request via email to planning@gbtownship.ca. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be followed for this morning's meeting. First, the Secretary-Treasurer will advise the committee as to when, how, and to whom notice of each of the hearings was circulated for the applications being considered. Next, each application will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the application and provide any information that is relevant. The Secretary-Treasurer will summarize any correspondence on file, and from there, the applicant may make a brief presentation if they so choose. And the public will have an opportunity to speak to the applications being considered as well. After the public forum, the committee will then deliberate on the proposed applications and consider a motion to pass, defeat, or defer the decision of the applications. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are A2502 for 108 Sugarloaf Lane, A2504 for 55 Curry Lane, A2505 for 20 Corbier Lane, and A2506 for 2 Island 3300 in Go Home Bay. To the Secretary-Treasurer, please.
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you. Our first minor variance application this morning is A25-02 for 108 Sugarloaf Lane. To the planner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just getting ready to share my screen. Everybody can see that. As stated, the first item on the agenda this morning is A2502 for 108 Sugarloaf Lane. The property known municipally as 108 Sugarloaf Lane is comprised of approximately 0.52 hectares with a frontage on 6 Mile Lake of 59.74 meters. The subject property is fairly substantially sized lot on 6 Mile Lake within the 6 Mile Lake waterfront community. The lot does have a substantial amount of mature trees and natural vegetation, and a private road provides ingress and egress to the property across Crown land. The property is within an area of seasonal residential lots, and the subject property is in keeping with the surrounding land uses. A minor variance was received by the Township on January 10th, 2025. The owner wishes to construct a new dwelling further north on the lot, which will meet the minimum required setbacks, but is requesting an increase in width by 1.52 meters. The existing dwelling is a very unique structure that the owners wish to retain and convert to a dryland boathouse. Excuse me. As the existing dwelling is being converted to a dryland boathouse, the provisions in section 4.1.12.4 are applicable. An error was made in the notice of hearing and the report as it relates to the length in section 4.1.12.4. The maximum permitted is 9 meters, whereas in fact the owner is requesting an increase to 13.15 meters, not 16.46 meters, as noticed in the notice of hearing and the report. Recirculation is not required as the 13.15 meters is less than the original number stated and being requested. The existing dwelling is a very unique building incorporating the design of a lighthouse that has been significant on 6 Mile Lake since the early 1960s. The owners wish to construct a new dwelling but would like to retain the distinct existing cottage and convert it to a dryland boathouse. In order to do this, the provisions in the zoning bylaw relating to a dryland boathouse must be met and a change of use permit applied for and issued. There is a deck on the existing dwelling that will also need to be removed, as a deck is not permitted on a dryland boathouse. Section 4.1.12.4 of the zoning bylaw outlines the provisions for a dryland boathouse as an accessory use to a permitted use. As the existing dwelling is to be converted to this dryland boathouse, and all habitable space and amenities must be removed from the structure, as per the provisions in section 4.1.12.4. Based on the definition of a dryland boathouse, which I have included up on the screen this morning, the type of access doors does come into play, and the ability to store marine vessels, other forms of watercrafts, and ATVs. This should be considered when the committee are making a decision on this matter. And the conversion of the dwelling to a dryland boathouse will not meet the maximum height, width, and length subject to the provisions noted in Table 4.1 and footnote 2 of Table 4.1. Therefore, in order to change the use of the building and keep the structure on the property, variances are required. Staff are recommending a minor variance agreement to ensure that the conversion of the building is done correctly and in a timely manner. From photos submitted with the application, it does appear that the owners have started clearing a portion of the lot where the new dwelling is proposed. It does appear after visiting the site that trees along the perimeter of the lot are mature and are being retained as much as possible. The proposed new dwelling, which will be further north on the property, will meet the setback requirements of the SR6 zone. However, the maximum width of a dwelling in the SR6 zone cannot exceed 25% of the lot frontage or 23 meters, whichever is more restrictive. The new dwelling is to be 16.46 meters in width, whereas the bylaw permits a 14.94 meter width. The agent acting on behalf of the owners has worked closely with the planning department during the pre-application consultation stage of the planning process in order to develop the property that best meets the intent of the township's planning documents. It was determined through these consultations that a variance would be required in order to achieve the desired development in a way that best meets the intent of the 6 Mile Lake Waterfront Community Guidelines. The Committee of Adjustment have the option to include in their decision conditions related to the conversion of the structure, and any requirements put in the decisions can be incorporated into the required minor variance agreement. Staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Yes. One letter was received from Kaylee Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating she has no concerns regarding this application. 2 letters of support were received by Denise Ridley and Alan Wicks and Sam and Andrea Montaloni. 1 letter was received from the Ministry of Transportation, stating that no comment or review is required. And 1 letter was received from Rosanna Prosser, citing no objection, who supports the lighthouse for historic preservation purposes.
Thank you. Is the applicant present, and do they wish to address the committee?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Victoria Hoffman, here on behalf of Flow Drawings through Violet Drive, Port Severn. This application came forward. We had originally designed a dwelling for this property that complied with the building widths and all the other bylaws that were going to come into play. Then we started looking at the existing cottage structure. The existing cottage, it's obviously very small, but they're attached to it. The if the lighthouse portion was removed, which is, Deb, can you go to that picture? It's just a unique building in the way of, when you think of a cottage, the existing structure itself, it kind of barely meets those requirements to begin with. So it's not going to be very challenging to convert it into change the use of it and to convert it into a storage structure. By pushing the cottage back, all of that storage space is becoming much farther from the water. So they just want that space to kind of store their watercraft related items such as paddles, life jackets. We have talked about putting a new door in to get bigger access, maybe paddle boat, stuff like that. That photo there. So to kind of the three bylaws that we're seeking, or the three areas of relief that we're seeking for this building. The first one, I don't know the order of them, but the first one is the height. Where we determined the height working with Deb, it's taken off the lighthouse on the front, which is kind of the ornament to the structure. The rest of the building is compliant. Same with the width, and I did submit a plan, but the width is taken from like the octagonal shape. The rest of the structure is compliant. And then, do you have the octagonal shape? No, okay, that's fine. That's okay. And then the length, same thing. If we were to remove the lighthouse, the structure would be compliant in the realm of the boathouse bylaws. So it's essentially just, we're really looking to kind of maintain that integrity of the structure. Reason being is because it's more of an ornament to the building, but it's the property owners are attached to it, as are the neighbors. People like to see it. It's kind of the history of the lake. So if there's an opportunity to keep it, they would like to maintain that history and just convert it into a different use. And then converting it into the different use, we'll address that with the building department through the change of use permit. But like I said, the kitchen will come out, the living space will come out. There's really only one interior wall in the building anyways, and it's just a wall for a bedroom, but we're going to look at that as well. Yeah, and then again, just the paddles, life jackets, safety gear. We're going to look into the paddle boards too, getting stuff like that, and we're also going to look into a door if possible. It'll probably be towards the back, just because of the deck that's coming off. But yeah, and the property owners are here if you have any questions for them. But I'm here as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Do the property owners want to add anything to the comments from Ms. Huffman?
I think so.
Okay, is there? Okay. Okay. Is there any member of the public present that or online that wishes to address this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public portion of the application and bring the matter before the committee for any questions or comments. And Member Graziano, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you through you, Chair. I know the property quite well as a resident of 6 Mile Lake, and I've visited the property in the past. I fully support the application. The lighthouse is very unique to the lake and presents a very unique aesthetic to it as well. Historically, it's been there for quite some time. I would hate to see this lost. As I cruise on by all the time, I always have a smile when I do pass the lighthouse, and as such, I'd like to see it preserved. So with that said, I support this application fully. I also know that the current footprint of the cottage is quite modest and somewhat of a challenge as well. And I'd like to see them be able to create something that's livable and habitable. Habitable. But aside from that, I do fully support it, and I'm glad to see that this application has come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Schmidt.
So I too, living and being at 6 Mile Lake, that has been a focal point of any time we've done water sports into the back bay there. I was actually shocked that there is actually an attached dwelling to the back of that lighthouse. Visually, the photo that I had on the screen, that most recent one, you can see the smaller buildings tucked in behind it. Visual impact from the water, you don't see any of that. It is literally dog legs right in behind it. I was surprised when I did a site visit last week, and thanks for having that cleared and a path to get in. That was there was a handful. But I too as well support retention of this. This I consider part of 6 Mile Lakes heritage personally. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Predko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a quick question with regards to the usability of the structure for a dryland boathouse, and maybe this is a question for Ms. Hoffman or for the planner. But is the front, the lighthouse portion of that structure usable as storing a paddle boat or other equipment, or is it really the back part of the structure that it would be more usable in that purpose? And my only reason for questioning this is if the part of the depth is the problem with meeting compliance with our bylaw, would it be, and you're going to be doing significant renovations on the structure, would it make sense to try to shorten it a little bit? Because it does look like there are additions at the back of the cottage. And if you were to take one of those off, would it still be functional, fully functional as a dryland boathouse?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we had looked at that, again, just trying to get the structure into compliance. The rear portion, like if you took that back portion off, which is kind of stepped up, it would fit closer from a length perspective anyways, but that's the portion of the structure that's actually in the best shape. And from a structure, when we look at our change of use, we have the most height there and we have the most opportunity to put enlarged doors or anything like that. It's better access, just from a grade and existing lot state too.
Yep.
So we looked at it, but it didn't really make sense to take that portion off. Unfortunately, it would have been the lighthouse side, and then that kind of brought us back to the heritage and the sentiment behind it, keeping it.
Yep, no, and that's what I figured. Okay, thank you. And then a quick follow-up to Deb, our planner. You had mentioned just the conditions on the minor variance application, and just to confirm, those are just the standard conditions. There's no additional ones that have been added to this file.
Through you, Mr. Chair. To Member Predko, I basically, the standard conditions are there. I did add the requirement for committee to consider of a minor variance agreement to ensure that the conversion of the structure is done, correctly according to the building department, and to ensure that it's done in a timely manner during construction of the new dwelling.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you. I have no other concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Matthews, please.
I just took my hand down, but through you, Mr. Chair, I pretty much had a similar question to Member Predko. I was not entirely sure if it was sort of 3 structures, but it is, right?
I think it had been added on, but the best condition is the one.
I was there this week, and again, thank you for your sign and your skidoo path to walk down that made it a lot easier to find. So my question has been answered.
Okay, thank you. Member Jarvis.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The lighthouse the lighthouse itself, without the buildings behind it, is a structure that really is the character that what needs to be retained, not the buildings that are attached to it and behind it. Has any consideration been given to either removing those buildings, and if not, I'm just curious about that, but also added to that, what would happen if we consider those buildings as a shed as opposed to a dryland boathouse?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, that's up to the applicant to figure which way they would like to go with that. But I mean, either way, I mean, the dryland boathouse, the advantage to that is that setback to the high water mark, right? Whereas a shed has to be 20 meters back, so.
Okay, notwithstanding the lighthouse as it currently stands, the buildings behind it, what is this? If we're looking at what is attached to the lighthouse, what kind of setback do those buildings have to the lake? Is there much there?
It's a legal non-complying structure,
Okay,
so
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, but any consideration given to removing those buildings that are attached to the lighthouse?
I think we could ask the applicant that question.
And to kind of further on my point to Stephen Jarvis, we had looked at taking the back off to try to bring the length more into compliance. We were still up against the height and the width with the just the nature of the lighthouse portion, but it kind of, you know, that's the functional end. Like that's got the whole thing we could use, but that very end piece that's kind of, because it's been kind of tacked on right over the years, that was the side that if we wanted to put a bigger door in, or it'll get the bigger but smaller watercraft vessels and stuff like that, right? Whereas the lighthouse itself, I mean, you're going to be storing cushions and life jackets and stuff in there. You're not getting the
Right, yeah, there isn't a lot of room in there. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. And I just have one more question for our planner. Item 3 here on the resolution says that the owner enter into a minor variance agreement. So I would expect that minor variance agreement has yet to be defined and.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct. I mean, the minor variance agreement is to ensure that the development is done to the standards that you as the committee, number one, would like to see, number two, that the building department like to see, and to ensure that it's done in a timely fashion. So, I mean, Victoria and I can sit and discuss what should be in it and what's reasonable. Of course, we draft it here in-house and then it goes to them for consideration. And there's always a security taken as well to ensure that it's done correctly, so.
And so what happens to that minor variance agreement? Once the building permit is issued and subsequently signed off on, does that minor variance agreement go away then?
No, it's registered on title against the property.
Oh, is that right? So
Yeah.
the conditions that you put in now are there
That's correct.
in perpetuity?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that is great. Okay, if there are no further questions, I will read the resolution. It is moved by Member Graziano, seconded by Member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application. I'm sorry, was there a question there?
She coughed.
We're gonna have to start over.
We didn't get very
No, I was on a roll though. Okay, minor variance application A25-02 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 108 Sugarloaf Lane to facilitate the construction of a new dwelling with an increase in width and the conversion of an existing dwelling to a dryland boathouse, requesting an increase in height, width, and length as follows. Height for the dryland boathouse required is 3.7, proposed is 5.18. Width is 4.7 meters, proposed is 5.15. Length required is 9 meters, proposed is 13.15. And the maximum width for SR6 zone, which is 25% of the frontage, or 23 meters, and what is proposed, which would be 14.92 meters, and the proposed is 16.46. And subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. And two, that the proposed new dwelling and the conversion of the existing dwelling to a dryland boathouse be substantially and proportionally in conformity with the dimensions set out on the application and sketches submitted and approved by the committee. And three, that the owner enters into a minor variance agreement with the Township of Georgian Bay relating to the conversion of the existing dwelling to a dryland boathouse, with the conversion taking place no later than September 2026 and prior to the final inspection of the new dwelling. And four, that the appropriate zoning certificate and building permit be obtained within 3 years from the date of decision from the township, only after the committee's decision becomes final and binding. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you. Our next application is A25-04 for 55 Curry Lane. To the planner, please.
Through the chair.
The subject property has an area of 5,142 square meters and a frontage of 59.4 meters on 6 Mile Channel located on the Trent Severn Waterway. A detached dwelling with attached deck, 2 sheds, a boathouse, 2 docks, a pergola, gazebo, and a sleeping cabin occupy the lands. The lands are zoned shoreline residential type 1 and designated waterfront within the district and township official plans. Curry Lane also crosses through the property. The front yard is characterized with a steep slope, granite rock, and mature pine trees. Wood staircases and walkways are located throughout the front yard to provide access to the docks and gazebo. A retaining wall has also been constructed in the front yard and is not regulated by the zoning bylaw as it has a height less than 1 meter. The pergola is not permitted in the front yard, and as such, staff have included a condition requiring the structure to be relocated. The purpose and effect of the application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw to facilitate the expansion of an existing detached dwelling, permit a sleeping cabin with an increased building height, and a gazebo with reduced setbacks. The applicant is proposing a 20 square meter Muskoka room at the front of the dwelling with the basement below. The grade at the front of the dwelling is changing to accommodate the basement, resulting in an increase to the height by 1.54 meters to a maximum height of 6.22 meters. The sleeping cabin has been constructed and has a height of 5.68 meters, whereas 4.5 meters is permitted. The gazebo has a setback of 2.55 meters from the front lot line, whereas 5 meters is required, and a setback 2.03 meters from the side lot line, whereas 5 meters is required. The variances pertaining to the sleeping cabin and gazebo are subject to the 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, whereas the variance pertaining to the dwelling is subject to the 2 tests under subsection 45(2) of the Planning Act. The gazebo has an area of 12.3 square meters, and the sleeping cabin has an area of 8.9 square meters with an attached deck. Currently, the sleeping cabin contains a loft, which is not permitted, and therefore staff have included a condition requiring it be removed. The district official plan is silent on accessory buildings, states that municipal official plans shall contain more detailed policies addressing development in waterfront area. The lands are located within a deer wintering area known as Stratum 2. In accordance with the district official plan, development or site alteration in Stratum 2 habitats should conserve valuable conifer thermal cover, feeding areas, and movement corridors. Staff understand that no mature coniferous vegetation was removed to accommodate the accessory buildings, and the property remains heavily vegetated. Majority of the property has a moderate wildland fire hazard rating. However, there appears to be a small portion along the westerly side lot line with an extreme rating that the sleeping cabin may be located within. District and township staff are not requesting an assessment to determine the wildland fire risk and required mitigation measures. In accordance with the township's official plan, the character of the waterfront designation will be maintained by retaining the overall low density of built form and development while generally preserving the shoreline in a natural and undeveloped appearance. The sleeping cabin is located in the rear yard, whereas the gazebo is screened by natural vegetation in the front yard. Granite rock and mature trees remain a dominant feature of the property shoreline. The official plan does not contain in-depth policies for accessory buildings, stating where accessory uses are permitted, standards shall be established in an implementing zoning bylaw, respecting the location, size, and bulk of such. The shoreline contains type 2 fish habitat, which are moderately sensitive to development, and structures are permitted within this classification. The zoning bylaw permits 1 gazebo to be located in the front yard of a lot in the shoreline residential zone, provided the gazebo does not exceed 15 square meters of floor area, has a maximum height of 3.5 meters, and a setback a minimum of 5 meters from the high water mark. The applicant is proposing a setback of 2.55 meters from the high water mark, which is referred to as the regulator's water's edge on the Trent Severn. The intent of this provision is to allow gazebos to be in close proximity to the water, providing optimal viewing of its aesthetic quality while providing protection from UV rays and or the great outdoors and not be prone to flooding. The gazebo is less than the maximum size permitted, is elevated due to the steep terrain of the shoreline, and the water level is controlled by Parks Canada. The applicant is proposing a sleeping cabin with a maximum height of 5.68 meters, whereas 4.5 is permitted. Staff understand that there was some confusion on how height is measured, in which the applicant thought the height was in compliance as they measured from the average natural grade on all sides of the building. However, in accordance with the zoning bylaw, the height is to be measured from the average natural grade at the front of the building to the middle of the peak and eaves. As the sleeping cabin is located on a slope, the grade at the front of the building is lower than at the rear. The intent of limiting height is to ensure sleeping cabins remain one story, accessory to the principal use on the lot in terms of massing, and to limit the visual impact of development from the water. As supported by site photos, the sleeping cabin is screened by mature trees, has a dark color scheme, and is located in the rear yard, limiting its visual impact. The sleeping cabin complies with the minimum yard requirements. However, the gazebo is set back 2.03 meters from the side lot line, whereas 5 is required. The 5-meter minimum required side yard applies to all accessory buildings and structures within the shoreline residential zones. The intent of this setback is to provide sufficient space between accessory buildings and the side lot line to allow for safe maintenance and avoid trespassing, prevent privacy concerns, ensure stormwater runoff is not falling onto neighboring properties, and to limit the visual impact of development on our water bodies. As supported by site photos, the gazebo is surrounded by natural vegetation, limiting views onto the neighboring property. Moving on to the dwelling. The tests for an application for permission to expand are 1, whether the application is desirable for appropriate development of the subject property, and 2, whether the application will result in undue adverse impacts on the surrounding properties and neighborhood. Only the proposed expansion may be evaluated for undue adverse impacts. The intent and purpose of the official plan is not a relevant consideration. To reiterate, the applicant is proposing an increased height by 1.54 meters to a maximum height of 6.22 meters, whereas an increase to a maximum height of 6 meters is permitted. Staff are of the opinion the proposed expansion is desirable for the appropriate development of the property and the application will not result in undue adverse impacts on the surrounding properties and the waterfront area, as the Muskoka Room addition is located within the footprint of the existing deck. The existing front yard setback is being maintained and not reduced. The increased height is required to facilitate the creation of a 16.7 square meter basement and not a second story, and existing vegetation in the front yard will screen the dwelling and is being retained. The committee may approve or deny any of the variances pertaining to the sleeping cabin and gazebo. In order to refuse the variance pertaining to the dwelling, the undue adverse impacts of the proposed expansion must be demonstrated by objective evidence and must be sufficient to override the property owner's right to reasonable flexibility, evolution, and expansion. The committee can defer the application to a later date if additional information is required to come to a decision. Planning staff have completed a detailed analysis of the variances to the zoning bylaw being requested and are recommending approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Yes, 1 letter was received from Kelly Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating the septic system may be undersized for the existing structures on the property, and a building permit will not be issued unless septic system is large enough to support all the structures on the property. 3 letters of support was received from Peter and Wendy Bowie, Darren Neal, Susan Hunter, and Rose McLeod. 1 letter was received from Liz Lawrence supporting the proposed increase to the dwelling height, however, expressed concerns about the unapproved construction of the sleeping cabin and gazebo, as well as stated they would not be in favor of any future construction of the gazebo in the proposed location.
Victoria Hoffman here on behalf of Jody Wordsworth, 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. A couple different ones with this one. I was brought out onto site to talk about a cottage addition. The existing cottage building height is 4.68 meters based on the average grade along the front of the existing structure. When we move that front wall out, we're now working with the slope, so the height from the floor to the new grade changes, and was a difference of about 4 feet. Plus, we increased the peak on the front of the gable by 2 feet. Collectively, that brought us up to the 6.22 meters. The septic was considered months ago. This has been on probably well over a year now. Discussion. It was also discussed with between Cody Shania and I, and we've addressed that. It shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, it'll be evaluated at the building permit stage by township reps themselves again, but that kind of just to harp on that. And then the letter that came from that last correspondence there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that one was just clarifying that the accessory structures were already existing. I think initially she thought that they were being proposed, which brings me to that. The gazebo has existed since roughly 2002. She's proposed to remove or relocate a couple of the other accessory structures in the front yard in hopes of keeping this one. This one, it's in a very ideal location, and because it's been there so long, it fits. It's not as noticeable. The neighbors on the side have support where it is, and shifting it the couple meters that we would need to just wouldn't be worth it. And it's a structure that they use and they'd really like to retain. There's also no cottages across from this property. The cabin, the property owner who's online as well, it was under the impression that no building permit would be required. She was also under the impression that it would comply with the bylaws just because it's only 8 by 12 square feet. The deck puts us over, and we will look at that again when we have to get a building permit. But even when I was on site, I had measured and this is what Shania was mentioning, I had measured the average grade on all 4 sides, opposed to just the tall side. That's kind of how that came into place. And then also just referencing that and Shania had a great photo there of like how hidden it was, kind of it's behind the cottage and there's great tree coverage on this property. Jody Wordsworth is present and online, and I think she would like to, she's not? She was texting me that she was. It could be her work email, maybe. No. Okay. Okay. I don't. I think she just wanted to essentially apologize for the cabin concerns, and as that's come up through the building department, she had just the unknowingness of thinking that the 8 by 12 structure wouldn't be an issue, and then kind of as we started this process, we're coming to the realization and kind of being at the mercy of the professionals that she had hired. This was a couple years ago type deal, through COVID and all that. So I think she was just she wanted to come online and apologize, basically. I'm here to answer any questions. My behalf. Sounds good.
Okay, hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm not sure if I can be heard or not. I think everything is unmuted.
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Yes, I just want to give you just a little bit of context of the cottage and how some of the things came to be.
I'm sorry, could you identify yourself, please? What is your name and address?
So my name is Jody Wordsworth, Joanne Wordsworth legally, and I'm the owner of 55 Curry Lane in Port Severn.
Thank you.
No problem. So just for context of how it came to be is, and I think from the history of the cottage since I've owned it, which is 32 years, anything that I did it within compliance. I got permits, had permissions, and it was only until COVID what had happened is once I moved to the cottage that first year. I think I moved in May and I didn't go home again until October, and I only went home because I don't have a 4-season road. I knew I was going to come back in the spring and be working at my kitchen table again. The cottage had never, ever been set up for a work environment. It was always just me and my daughter when I would go. So, COVID is what it is. Starlink kind of came into play. I was able to have internet. At the end of that first season, I didn't want to be at the end of my kitchen table anymore because it was, rough and slow internet. My contractor said, he goes, we can easily build like a little, a little office for yourself. And I said, well, we don't have enough time between now and the spring of when I'm coming back. He said, well, I'll build it within compliance of the, the 100 square feet. And we can, just kind of tuck it, back here, which is where it is now. So I was completely confident that I was given the right advice, that he was going to build it to in accordance, that I didn't require a permit. So my neighbors next door, the Rajteks, they have their screen porch on that side of the gazebo. So I was very conscious of making sure that I didn't put a window that there would be a light shining that they would never have seen for all the years they had been there. So I was very conscious to make sure I wasn't going to be intrusive to my neighbors or to the lake in front of me, which there's crown land ahead of me, but there's lots of boaters and stuff, right? So it's tucked in. And when you go in the boat and I look up, even in the middle of, when it's starting at dusk with the lights on, you can't see it from the trees. Also, the little gazebo at the front, that was, built 25 years ago, and it's been there without, sorry, my dog is bothering me. It has been there, and it's also tucked in that you can't see it. And I use it just really as a workout room. There's no music. There's, it's quiet. And my neighbors next door, Peter and Wendy Bowie, are completely fine with it staying there, and you can't even see them. Like I'd have to stand up on my tippy toes to look over. It's a lot of rock at my place. So that's kind of how that one was. But I call the office my she shed. The she shed was never ever intended for sleeping. So with the cottage being as small as it is, I had said to Nick, I think, is there possible just to do a little storage loft that I can stick up, bins or whatever, as opposed to every nook and cranny trying to, close up the cottage in the fall. So he had said, low height requirement, Jody, you should be fine. So again, I didn't know. And then the deck was only put on. Really, the stairs to get to the door were necessary. The deck in the front was just to make it look appealing. It wasn't, I don't even use it. The Muskoka chair set that's sitting there, it is barely holding together. And the only reason why it's there is my niece, who was 12 when she passed away, built that. So I want to keep it. So that's how those things kind of came to be. And it really was just to be, so I could work, not to, not to give you the bird of I'm not paying attention. So that's where I'm at. So I'm sorry, but I would really appreciate you approving.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this application? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public portion of the meeting and bring the matter before the committee for any questions or comments. And I do not see any more than two hands up. So we will begin with Member Graziano.
Thank you, and through your chair. First to the applicant's planner. I believe that you should receive an office space within our township, given that you're doing back to back. But joking aside, I had the opportunity to speak with Ms. Wordsworth back at during the municipal elections, and at the time, she had articulated the same issue to me with respect to the bunkie and what had had happened. And I strongly believe that she developed that bunkie in good faith based on the information she received by her contractor. Secondly, in assessing the property, I know the challenges that she's confronted with, as there's quite a grade behind her that pushes quite a bit of water, if memory serves me correctly, her way. And in addition to that, the front retaining walls that she has there are there and serves a purpose to help with that as well. So, with that said, knowing what I know with regards to this location and being on site, and also having subsequent conversations with Ms. Wordsworth, I fully support this application. I feel that given the challenges that she has, and with what I've seen and heard and discussed, I feel that she is being genuine. I also took a look at GIS, and I believe within the GIS I could see the gazebo there since 2008. If you look closely, and so again, I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Graziano. Member Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, just Victoria, a couple points of clarification. The sunroom that is proposed, the addition, it doesn't project further than the existing decks that are there now. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Right. So
Line
it's
it
just because of the landscape and the height and. Right.
Even the basement, we're not really sure what we're gonna get out of that space. Like, we're not proposing any blasting by any means. It's way too close to the cottage and all that. We just put it there as a, just in case she can get like a laundry area down there or something like that.
Okay. And I think one question was answered because you mentioned about putting a structure of 8 by 12, you don't need a permit. But then I was going to say, but don't you need a permit for a sleeping cabin? But now it's not really a sleeping cabin, it's a she cave or an office, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's a bunkie, but building department here, but as a designer, I think an 8 by 12 of any size structure doesn't need a building permit. It still needs to comply with municipal bylaws. The only structure that can now increase to 162, and this is putting my code cap back on, but is a shed, which is non-habitable, and this is a habitable structure, okay. So it's a bunkie.
And one other point, just for my own clarification, the pergola is to be removed. Is that?
Yes, the pergola is to be removed. There was a shed out front that is going to the back.
Yeah. So I think in one of the pictures it shows a massive block foundation that
that's the retaining wall. Yes.
Is that going to stay?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's to the kind of what Christian had mentioned. She had some pretty crazy runoff coming down her driveway a couple years ago. She had sent some videos and stuff like that. It did come up in our review, and I think it was brought to the bylaws attention, but I'm not sure what that's.
Well, and I can certainly confirm that it is not a four-season road, as I was there on Monday. And I did not go down the big hill. Thank you for that clarification.
Snowmobile access right now.
Okay, thank you, Member Matthews. Member Jarvis, please.
Yeah, the indication the gazebo was built about 25 years ago. Is that correct from the owner?
Correct, yeah. It was I had 2002 done.
With or without a permit? Was a permit even required?
Permit was obtained. No.
So a permit would have been required, but one was not. So the gazebo was also built without a permit?
I don't know the square footage.
If I may, through the chair, our records do not have a permit for the gazebo. I believe Kaylee can speak to whether or not a permit would have been required. It has a footprint of 12.3 square meters, if I recall correctly. The problem in terms of the zoning bylaw, though, the 91 zoning bylaw that applied at the time, the building was still not in compliance with that bylaw. So we don't consider it a legally existing structure because it didn't comply with the bylaw that applied when it was constructed.
Okay, that's one question. If Kaylee's on, my other question is with regards to the bunkie. My thinking if the bunkies, if we allow the bunkie as is, having the loft there, I don't think makes much of a difference except from the standpoint of septic capabilities. But then Victoria, you mentioned something about the septic. Is the septic situation cleared up or not cleared up? It needs to be reviewed. What's the status of the septic?
I was speaking with Cody Avery about it last week with Shania, and we'll readdress it. Right now, to be honest, there's 2 bedrooms in the cottage and then the bunkie. It's a 2-bedroom system. We're proposing removing one of the bedrooms in the cottage because she needs more living space. So
okay,
we're actually bringing the septic into more compliance. To be honest.
Okay, so if we allowed, just my idea, if we allowed the loft to stay in the cabin, would that affect the septic situation?
It wouldn't affect me, but it affects her.
Mike.
Through the chair, the loft is quite minimal. It is accessed by a ladder propped up against it. However, our official plan, our zoning bylaw is very clear that sleeping cabins are not permitted to have like storage lofts, cellars, anything like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. One last observation. There seem to be an awful lot of buildings on this property: sheds, cabin, gazebo, pergola. I'm just curious if there's any consideration for removing any of the other buildings to try and clean things up a bit.
So we are taking one down and removing one to the rear. So it is going to change. There's a lot of trees in the front, but it is going to change that.
Which building is coming down?
So there's one where there's a pergola, which is the closest to the water. And then there's a shed in one of my photos. It's like right beside the stairs. And It's kind of tall too.
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
And that's the building that's being moved to the rear.
Right. Okay. And then, I mean, we're removing the pergola, but that retaining wall has been indicated that's going to it's going to stay there anyway, right?
On my end, it doesn't affect the building, and it doesn't sound like it was the planning policy side of things, more of a bylaw. Can you correct me if I'm wrong, Shania? But it's also like, if it becomes a bylaw issue, we'll address it. And she would probably take it to get it approved, because like I said, her property, the damage that the runoff was doing to her property. We have talked about it though, and it was, if it comes up, she'll go to the next on the site alteration, I think was what it was.
It just seems to me there's an awful lot going on this property, shed-wise, building-wise. I would love to see things cleaned up a little bit more. Gazebo obviously is not an issue from the water, and I really don't even have a problem with the loft in the cabin. But I would like to see things cleaned up a little bit more on this property. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. If there are no further questions, I'll just summarize a couple of the comments that were made. And I notice here, as part of the resolution, we're talking about requesting for approval of the maximum height to 5.68 meters, whereas 4.5 is. Oh, Member Rivet.
Thank you. My original concern on this was the fact that the gazebo is built 50% closer to the high water mark. It's built 60% closer to the side yard setback. And we have a comment from a neighbor concerned about the development. So is this an application where we can have a plan or an agreement that there will be no more development on this property? Is my concern about the fact that, the encroachment is already there with the gazebo, which has raised an alarm with the neighbor. The other issue is if the loft comes out of that building, is it structurally built that it can have the loft removed? That's just a concern. So I don't know if that's a realistic request structurally. And also if there is going to be that agreement, the agreement should confirm that, there will be no additional use of that loft for storage or use by people. But those are my concerns. I mean, if I didn't realize that the gazebo had been up for so long, my inclination is to move it unless there's a reason it has to be there. Is there a reason it had to be within the encroachment? Could it not be moved in to be compliant? So if there's an agreement on this, that there's no more development, I'd be happy with that consideration.
Okay, thank you, Member Rivet. Is there any comment you wish to add to that, Ms. Montfort?
Through the chair, I would like to clarify that correspondence that was referenced. I did answer some questions proposed by that, and my apologies, I forget the person's name, but I did go back and forth answering some questions. I believe the correspondence that was captured in the script reflects her original initial questions and statements about the proposal once I explained to her that the gazebo was already in existence, and same for the shed. As far as I know, she had no further concerns, and she just didn't want the gazebo to be expanded, which I confirmed it was not.
Oh,
I'm sorry, is there another question here?
Well, just to that end, I mean, we were provided with the correspondence with the neighbor's concern, but there's no more correspondence to say, oh, my concerns have been answered. So we're not part of that continuing conversation. So I'm not sure how we're supposed to, we can't consider it if we don't know it's going on. So my last comment is I still have a concern. We're not part of all conversation.
Okay, no, I understand where you're coming from. So are there any other questions or concerns? Member Schmidt.
Thank you, through Chair Hill. I did have the pleasure of going over that hill this morning. Thank heavens the neighboring property had a little bit of a turnaround so I could get a run back up that hill. Big thank you to the staff for the time that was taken to supply all those photos, because the topography to get back into that area, even I've been in there in the summertime, and it can be a little treacherous to get in Curry Lane if people haven't been there. I I completely respect the concerns of the gazebo location currently as it is, but based on the lay of the land, I don't even know where they could tuck or move that into a preferred position. The only thing that I don't enjoy the look of on that property is that block retaining wall, which I think could probably have a facade or something to soften that so it isn't such a visually obtrusive. But aside from that, I trust staff. If staff has communicated and alleviated the concerns from that neighbor, I would take that at face value. I trust Shia. But I personally, when you lay all this out, I think the net result is going to be okay. I think it's going to be an attractive dwelling when it's completed, because it is a pretty modest structure as it currently is now, and especially being a one bedroom cottage. So I know the building department will look after septics, and maybe the owner would consider doing something to soften that cinder block wall, or if bylaw makes it be removed, but we'll leave that to the powers that be. But thank you.
Thank you, Member Schmidt. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay. That is Ms. Wordsworth. Do you have something you'd like to add? I see your hand up.
Yes, yes, please, if you don't mind. Just regarding the two things that pops into my head about the retaining wall, that was built with only because of purpose and safety. I did send Mr. Graziano some videos that showed the water, the runoff that was coming from the road from the top, and it was literally going under my cottage and off, and it was dangerous of no railing. So I really felt that it was an emergency to do that. I agree on the block at the front, that to soften that, my intention is, if it's permitted and can stay, because I don't know what the solution frankly would be otherwise, due to the erosion, and I'm trying to keep it, I like natural and I like my privacy at the cottage. So I don't have a problem of including that, of a natural stone facade at the front, if that's something that's acceptable for cosmetics, if that's a preference. The gazebo, again, please excuse my ignorance, it was 23 years ago. I bought a $600 Walmart screen kit, is how that's built, and it's tucked in and unobtrusive from anybody. So it wasn't, I really just didn't, like 25 years younger, I didn't give it any thought. I thought, well, my screen kit, I'll put it up, that's perfect. And it's been there even when my daughter was a teenager. So it's, it would be a shame for it to have to go. And as somebody has mentioned, there's really, I don't even know if I can tuck it back with the rock any further. And it would be a matter of a couple of feet. So it's a real difference when you can't see it from the lake anyway. The other building that we're talking about to tidy it up for the fellow that referred to that was a smoke shack that also was born out of COVID, of something to do and a hobby. So that's, literally going in the back, and that'll be gone. And I think the cottage will look beautiful when finished. The sleeping cabin is just, the storage loft is storage. So the hole to go upstairs, like you couldn't get anything up there that would be more than a storage tub. Like nobody would want to sleep up there because it's hot. And the hole to get anything up that little ladder, frankly, I don't know how you would do it. So I would like to put minds at ease for that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Wordsworth. And
Okay.
do we have any other comments from the committee on this? Okay, I think we're all on the same page here, and I don't think there's much of a concern regarding the gazebo other than what's mentioned in the resolution. It seems that both the gazebo and the sleeping cabin are well protected by shoreline vegetation, so there's no visual impact from water. And again, so we have that in the first portion of the resolution. I happen to agree with Member Jarvis and other comments that were made by committee members here that the loft, if you call it that, a loft in a 4x8 building is more probably represented as a shelf. It's certainly not something that you could use, and unless there is any objection, I think we should just remove that item 4 from the resolution when it refers to removing that loft. So, yes, what is it, Mr. Jarvis?
With your indulgence, if you don't mind, I have no problem with that. I think that makes sense. I think we should add another condition with regards to that retaining wall. It's been suggested that something could be done to soften that retaining wall, if not remove it. And I'm wondering if we can include something in the agreement along those lines, along with removing the loft requirement.
The property owner assured us that is her intention, is to go ahead and do that. And you know, I don't think we need to insist that she plant a shrub there, but you know, does unless the committee does, do you feel strongly about that, Member Schmidt?
I think this is very much on bylaws radar. I think that's the impression that I get. It seems to me they're in the process that they are either going to enforce a removal or something to happen there. So I wonder if that's the powers that be on that side of the room look after making sure. And that's the only thing I'm seeing. They're already talking about it. They know about it. So hopefully that will be the resolve that makes sense when it gets under their lens.
Yeah, I agree. And see, the retaining wall is not a part of this application either. So there's no line in here that refers to the and at the beginning of the conversation there was a question regarding how the height of that retaining wall was measured. So I'm not sure that we need to address that as part of this minor variance application. Did you have a comment, Director Whitlip?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to further to what Member Schmidt said and what you said, municipal bylaw enforcement staff are aware of the retaining wall. At this time, planning staff do not believe it's a structure that's regulated by the zoning bylaw. So it is not part of this application, nor from staff's perspective does its presence or absence or appearance have any bearing on the variances that are being considered. Having said that, though, to Member Schmidt's comments, it is the intent of municipal law staff to investigate when the snow is gone, to understand whether there may be a contravention of the site alteration bylaw in terms of works within the regulated shoreline area under the site alteration bylaw. So they will have a look. But at this point in time, there's no zoning contravention associated with that structure, or that retaining wall.
So, in essence, we don't need to address that in this application. So, based on all the input we've had so far, I'm sorry. Do you have a question as well?
Just a point of clarity, and maybe you're not quite there on the recommendation, the sleeping cabin. I don't see anything in there that talks about the loft. It just talks about the height.
Number 4 on the resolution. It's second section, number 4.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I can understand why it's there, but I don't think after our discussion that it's appropriate. So we'll do that. So we're just removing line 4, and when I read the resolution, I will leave it out.
Through the chair, if I may, the reason for, the condition of removing the loft from the sleeping cabin is because the zoning bylaw is very clear it's not permitted, and they did not seek relief to allow for that loft. And it was actually determined that if they wanted to seek relief, it would be more like a zoning bylaw amendment because of how clear our zoning bylaw is. So that's why the condition's there. Without it, and with that loft still in there, the building would still not be in compliance with the zoning bylaw despite the variances being received, should they be approved.
So no executive.
Well, just to be clear, we've had a number of applications for buildings like this with the loft that got approved. So that instead of removing this clause, then do we have to change the wording so that we approve it? And then that would meet the requirements of the bylaw enforcement officer?
Through the chair, if the applicant would like to have the loft in the sleeping cabin, that would trigger a zoning bylaw amendment application, which would go to council.
That is unbelievable. The resolution. Just to the committee members.
If I could maybe just get a point of clarification, if the loft had doors on it and it was truly storage, you know what I mean, like cabinet doors or whatever, so that literally it was just storage, does that negate it being a loft? I'm just trying to figure out the path of, is if it's truly not being used as a loft, as a bedroom, is there?
Yeah.
Victoria,
I think we should rename it to shelf.
Or attic.
It's already just a ladder, so.
Yeah, it's, you have to consider the, Ms. Hoffman, do you have an idea of the size of the shelf that is in that structure?
I do not know.
So is the applicant still online this?
Yes.
How big is the shelf or loft that we were talking about in that structure?
Geez, so it'd be the width, let's see, the front would be the width back of where the door is, from the front to the other side of the door to the other wall, and then a couple of feet on the other side. So Victoria, could you kind of scale that out, do you think?
It's like an L shape, right, Jody?
Yeah, it's like an L shape. So you've got from the front where the front window's facing the lake, you've got from there to the door on the main level that you can see. It goes to there because then the hole is there to stuff stuff up. And then on the other side, it's like an L shape to be, I don't know, say half, like to the middle of the windows. And then the rest of it's that big hole, so I can stuff stuff up there.
It's an 8x12 structure. It's a few feet along the 8-foot side and then a few feet along the 12-foot side.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound like a loft.
It was never like that. Building has never been it's never been intended to sleep in. It's never been intended to be livable in the sense of overnight guests or anything like that. But it's just really a room that I work in instead of my kitchen table.
Is it a substantial part of that structure, Ms. Hoffman?
Structurally?
Yeah, like if you took 4 boards out, would it mean that the loft is removed?
Yeah, just the way it's framed. But
So I could answer that probably. I mean, if they're asking me to remove the loft above, what I think we could do is so where the hole is, not from the front, is just take out, call it 4 boards to the side, and then it's just really a shelf at the front. So I'm losing shelf space. So I'm losing it's really for bin storage.
it's not structural. It's not structural.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think we're all on the same boat. So, okay, Member Predko?
Well, I thank you, and through you, Chair. I think my comments are just going to be in line with what you're about to say. But if the loft could be converted to strictly shelf space or rename it as an attic, and it's no longer a loft, but just a ceiling storage area. But whatever is easier for the homeowner to convert so that it's going to be compliant with the definition of a loft.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have.
Sorry, from the homeowner, what's easiest would be approve as it is and use it as an attic. Call it an attic if that's what we need to do.
Wordsworth, your microphone is on, and okay, thank you. Mr. Whitland, would you offer a comment, please?
Sure. I'd just like to say that, so currently the space as it is, and we've heard different descriptions and characterizations of it, does meet the zoning bylaws definition of a loft and does not comply with the zoning bylaw. I've not heard anything specific about a proposal from the applicant to bring it into compliance with the zoning bylaw in some structural way. nor have I heard a request from the applicant to strike that condition. Staff's understanding leading into this hearing was that there was concurrence on that condition. That may change, I could be wrong, but at this point, from staff's perspective, the recommendation would be to keep the condition to ensure compliance
Okay,
with the zoning
we
bylaw.
got clarity on that just a moment ago, in that the applicant is aware that the requirement, if we were to leave the resolution and stands that the loft must be removed, that removing you know, part of the lumber that is making up that loft that's not structural would meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So with that in mind, we'll proceed with the resolution as written. And seeing no more questions or comments, I will read the resolution. It is moved by Member Rivet, seconded by Member Matthews. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Community of Adjustment hereby approves the following variances requested under minor variance application A25-04. One, that a legal non-complying detached dwelling with an increased height by 1.54 to a maximum height of 6.22 meters, whereas an increase in the maximum height from 6 meters is permitted. A sleeping cabin with a maximum height of 5.68 meters, whereas a maximum height of 4.5 meters is permitted. A gazebo with a setback of 2.55 meters from the high water mark, whereas a minimum setback of 5 meters is permitted. And 4, a gazebo with a setback of 2.03 meters from the side lot line, whereas a maximum setback of 5 meters is permitted. And subject to the following conditions. 1, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or a correspondence from the Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision, and that the buildings and structures be substantially and proportionately in conformity with the dimensions as set out on the application and sketches submitted and approved by the committee. 3, that the pergola shown in the front yard on the existing site plan is relocated to the rear yard. 4, that the loft be removed from the sleeping cabin. 5, that the appropriate zoning certificate and building permit be obtained within 3 years from the date of the decision from the township, only after the committee's decision has become final and binding. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you. Our next application is minor variance application A25-05 for 20 Corbiere Lane. To the planner, please.
Through the chair, the subject property has an area of approximately 5,900 square meters with a frontage of 39.55 meters on Georgian Bay. The lands are designated community area within the district official plan and community within the Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community within the township's official plan. The shoreline contains type 1 fish habitat, while the lands are identified as having moderate to high archaeological potential and partially within the moderate wildfire hazard rating. The property is zoned shoreline residential type 1. The lands are developed with a detached dwelling, garage, dock, and 3 other accessory buildings or structures. The property boundaries and rear yard are characterized by mature trees and natural vegetation. The front yard is grass covered and there is a gravel driveway and parking area between the dwelling and detached garage. The purpose and effect of the application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw to facilitate the reconstruction and expansion of a legal non-complying detached garage in a required yard. Note that variances number 1 and 2 shown here on my screen are technical in nature as they facilitate the same expansions requested in variances numbers 3 and 4. A second existing accessory building is also proposed to be demolished to accommodate the new garage. The existing detached garage was constructed in 1983 with a floor area of 93.6 square meters and is set back 1.6 meters at its closest point from the side lot line. As the applicant is proposing to increase the size of the garage beyond what our current zoning bylaw allows, the application is being applied for under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, being subject to the 4 tests. In accordance with the provincial planning statement, development and site alteration shall not be permitted on adjacent lands to a natural heritage feature or area unless the ecological function of the adjacent lands has been evaluated, and it has been demonstrated that there will be no negative impacts. The District of Muskoka defines adjacent lands as those within 120 meters of a fish habitat. As the development is the reconstruction and expansion of a legally existing building, set back approximately 55 meters from the high water mark, staff are of the opinion that there will be no negative impacts on the fish habitat. The district's official plan permits the area municipality to scope or waive the requirement for an environmental impact study to support a development proposal within adjacent lands if, in their opinion, the proposed development or site alteration is minor and is not anticipated to have a negative impact on the natural feature or its functions. Staff are of the opinion that the development is minor and will require minimal site disturbance, which will occur in a central location to the property boundaries. The subject lands are also within the flood hazard limit, as identified by the District of Muskoka GeoHub floodline mapping shown here on my screen. The PPS states in Policy 522A that development shall generally be directed to areas outside of hazardous lands adjacent to the shorelines of the Great Lakes, which are impacted by flooding hazards. And states in Policy 523C that development and site alteration shall not be permitted within areas that would be rendered inaccessible to people and vehicles during times of flooding hazards, erosion hazards, and/or dynamic beach hazards, unless it has been demonstrated that the site has safe access appropriate for the nature of the development and natural hazard. Therefore, the PPS provides flexibility to consider development in hazardous areas, provided Policy 523 can be satisfied. A hazard risk assessment would need to be completed by a qualified professional, such as a coastal engineer, to satisfy the PPS. The district official plan states that the area municipal official plan shall contain more detailed policies addressing development in community areas, such as but not limited to the appropriate mix of uses, maximum or minimum permitted densities, protection of neighborhood character, etc. Approximately 1/3 of the lands at the rear of the property appear to have a moderate wildfire hazard rating. The plan states that development shall generally be directed outside of areas that are unsafe due to presence of hazardous forest types for wildland fire, being those having a high to extreme rating, and does not contain policies for lands having a moderate rating. The official plan also states that development and site alteration shall not be permitted within areas that would be rendered inaccessible to people and vehicles during times of flooding hazards and/or erosions, similar to the PPS. Planning staff are of the opinion that the application maintains the general intent and purpose of the district official plan, provided that the applicant obtains a hazard risk assessment to address this policy. The detached garage is located in the rear yard, and no natural vegetation is being removed. The development does not impede the design guidelines of the master plan, which speaks to the vision and the design of the core area, our streetscapes, waterfront features, and public open space. A 30-meter setback is required from cold water fish habitat for new development, but the proposed detached garage will be set back 57.6 meters from the high water mark. The official plan contains policies for development on lands prone to flooding and defines the regulatory flood elevation on Georgian Bay as 178.3 meters above Canadian geodetic datum. New development, habitable buildings, or additions to such are not permitted below the regulatory flood elevation. Since the proposed development represents redevelopment that would include replacing 2 existing accessory buildings with 1 new detached garage in approximately the same location, planning staff are of the opinion that the applicant's proposed development can be considered provided a qualified professional assesses the hazard risk for the development and, if possible, recommend mitigation and flood-proofing measures. The applicant is proposing a building height of 5.18 meters, whereas 4.5 meters is permitted, and a ground floor area of 152.01 square meters, whereas 112 square meters is permitted. The intent of living height The intent of limiting the height and ground floor area is to assist with ensuring that the detached garage remains accessory to the principal building or use on the lot in terms of size, and to reduce any potential negative visual impacts on both neighboring properties and the waterfront. The garage will have a height and floor area less than that of the dwelling. The building location in the rear yard, with majority being located behind the dwelling, and natural vegetation in the side and front yards, will limit the visual impact of the garage on neighboring properties and the waterfront. The detached garage is also in a similar location to that on the neighboring property to the south and is not close to the neighboring dwelling. The applicant is proposing to increase the height and floor area within the required 5-meter side yard, whereas the reconstruction and expansion is permitted provided such is not within a required yard. This means that the applicant could expand the floor area and height of the portion of the building located outside of the 5-meter side yard. The intent of this provision is to limit the issues of noncompliance and not increase the impact of the noncompliance on the neighboring properties. A portion of the existing garage is set back 1.6 meters from the side lot line, while the majority is set back 3.8 meters. The proposed garage will be set back 3.8 meters from the side lot line. To put this into perspective, 18.28 square meters of the 152 square meters will be located within the required side yard. The proposed garage allows for the secure indoor storage of the property owner's motor vehicles and recreational vehicles, as well as allows for the removal of the existing deteriorating garage, a tent shelter, and a shed. The Committee of Adjustment can either approve or deny any one of the variances. Should the committee require additional information to come to a decision, they may defer the application to a later date. Staff have completed a detailed analysis and are recommending approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wanfer. Madam Secretary, has there been correspondence on this application?
One letter was received from Kelly Nilkison, Chief Building Official, stating the structure must be located far enough from the septic as required by the OBC, and the structure can in no way be in the direction of flow mantle loading area of the septic system. 3 letters of support were received from Dan Corbier, Lucas Laramie, and Ronald and Trinidad Taylor.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present, and do they wish to address the committee? Yes.
My name is Victoria Hoffman, here on behalf of Flow Drawings, 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. Jean McDonald is also sitting beside me. The purpose of this building is to remove the accessory structures, tents, trailers, the stuff that they have on the property, and consolidate it all. You know, just there's safety reasons, protecting their multiple vehicles, and also just cleaning up the site. We're working with the existing parameters of the current building because we are limited because of the septic. They did hire a company to come out and locate the pipes, and we did kind of do some of that legwork before we even went down this path, just to make sure that it was feasible from a code perspective. Again, all of that will get reneged at the building code side, but just to kind of get a jump on that. This structure will only be used for residential use. The owner did prepare a cover letter that would have been sent out to you guys, but it's for storing personal SUVs, cars. There's multiple boats, a recreational vehicle, snowmobile trailers, snow tractors, stuff like that. The height and the GFA increase is both to accommodate those. The height, it will be lower than the existing cottage. But from the water, I don't think you're going to see the building behind it, because they're almost, the cottage is slightly wider and it's taller, and it's a very, you know, through kind of property. It's also a dead-end road, so there's not a lot of traffic there. So the concern largely being from the water side. And we are considerably, I think we're 150 feet from the water or something like that, 56 meters. And the last kind of reasoning was just that they're readying for retirement.
No, I'm Gene. I'm Jason's dad. Jason had to work last night. He's an RN at the hospital in Kitchener. So any questions I should be able to answer.
Microphone, please.
Is there any member of the public present that wishes to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public portion and bring the matter before the committee for any questions or comments. And we have member Graziano.
Thank you. And Ms. Hoffman, I'm going to refer to my earlier statement, but with regards to this particular application, I'm looking at GIS right now, and I see in 2008, it looks like there was an extension to the rear of this garage to begin with anyways, which would essentially be echoing what is being applied for now. Do we know why that, and again, perhaps you're not looking at the GIS, so you're not understanding what I'm referring to, but in 2008, the aerial photograph shows that there was a rooftop that exceeded beyond where the current tent structure is. And it's since, at some point, let's just see, in 2013, it looks like it was still there. 2018, it looks like it's gone. So why was that structure removed? Was it a lean-to in the rear? And if so, based on what I'm seeing being applied for, relative to what was existing in 2008 and 2013, I can't see why we would have any issues approving this. So if there's any clarity on that, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
It could have been the tent positioning, or there was also a couple sheds back there once upon a time that have been collapsed. Storage has always been an issue on the property, so I'm not 100% sure. I don't have the GIS photo in front of me, but to our knowledge, yeah. And there's also some like sheds that were really close to the thing, so because the walls were backing, it was all one structure type deal, but it was really kind of hodgepodgey. Then some of them have been taken down, so.
Okay.
Additional comment, Chair, if I may. It just seems to me like it's all one single structure integrated into each other, but perhaps to your point, it may have been, they may just have been abutting, but thank you very much for that.
Member Jarvis, please.
Thank you, through the chair. I don't have too many concerns with this, but I do have concern with a statement made in the application. And in fact, I did write an email to our planner yesterday, just seems it never went out. Oops. The question is, in the description, it says the majority of the subject lands are below the regulatory flood elevation within the flood hazard limit. And then it shows in the application itself that most of it's floodplain. Is that correct? Most of the property?
Through the chair, that is correct. And it's not just this property, it's many of the properties on that section of Georgian Bay.
And are we talking floodplain with relation to high water or from drainage inland?
That would be, sorry, through the chair, that would be high water.
Because there is a high water mark indicated on the survey, which is in front of the cottage, logically. So is there a rise and then does it drop back down, or can you tell me?
Through the chair, the high water mark is less than the regulatory flood elevation.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, it does pertain to my next question then. Should we be allowing any building, any new building to go on property that is within the floodplain? I think that's an issue that district is dealing with their new floodplain mapping. I know that City of Toronto has that issue. Other jurisdictions are also dealing with it in relation to climate change and the severity now of flooding. I presume we don't have anything in place, but was that consideration given to this application? I mean, it's up to the owner. Obviously, they got to deal with consequences, but still, I'm just wondering if we should be allowing this.
Through the chair, policy for staff to recommend approval of this application, we had to include the condition that a hazard risk assessment be prepared by a coastal engineer to address the policies in our official plan, as well as the district official plan and the provincial policy statement.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And further to what Shania said, the way that Shania has structured the recommended The recommendation and its associated conditions is such that should the committee generally be favorable toward this application, wish to approve it, the requirement for the flood hazard assessment and any mitigation, minimum floor elevation, minimum window openings, floodproofing measures, or whatever the case may be, Shania wanted to structure it in such a way that we don't send the applicant off to do a flooding study, I'll call it that, the hazard risk assessment, unless there's general support for the application anyway. So if they're going to do the work, pay the money to have that done. And if it comes back favorable, the structure of the recommendation and the conditions is such that they could proceed. Of course, should the study come back that no, it's not recommended that any structure be built, it cannot be flood proofed, there's a real hazard here, then of course it would not proceed from our standpoint. But the way it's structured is to allow them to proceed, but we don't want to, again, send them off to spend money on a study unless we're otherwise satisfied, the committee's otherwise satisfied that the variance is supportable.
Okay, thank you very much. I see a hand up from Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Victoria, just point, I think you mentioned this, but I was looking at the survey, and there's like a couple of buildings behind. You said all buildings will be removed, all be incorporated into one new garage. I don't have a problem with this, particularly with the amount of toys that this gentleman has. I think I'd want to have some place to store them as well. So.
They win.
Okay. Okay, Member Rivet, please.
Sorry. Yes, I just want to say I have no problem with the application. I think it looks great. And I will say from a risk management perspective, the provision to make the applicant responsible for the flood mitigation is significant. There's no, that way everybody knows the risk. The applicant knows what's ahead of them before they proceed. I think that's a fantastic resolution, and I'm in support of this application.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question for the planners. 177.4 is still high water mark?
Through the chair, 177.4 is still the high water mark.
Anything below that then is considered floodplain?
So the regulatory flood elevation is higher than the high water mark, and I believe it's 178.3 on on Georgian Bay. So this would indicate that these lands are relatively flat from the high water mark back.
And they are.
Yes, they definitely are. Okay, that's great. If there are no further questions or comments, I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby...
Chair. Sorry, our CBO has a comment, please. Thank you.
Oh, Ms. Nicholson, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Christian. Just a quick note on top of that, the Ontario Building Code also has regulations for building in floodplains, just so you know that it's going to be caught at through both processes.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions or comments before I read the resolution? Okay, seeing none, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby approves the following variances requested under minor variance application A25-05. 1, that reconstruction and expansion of an existing legal non-complying detached garage resulting in an increased floor area and height in a required yard, whereas section 4.11A permits the expansion provided it is not within a required yard. 2, that the reconstruction and expansion of a legal non-complying detached garage which does not achieve compliance with section 4.1.15 of the zoning bylaw, whereas section 4.11A requires that all provisions of the bylaw be complied with. And 3, a detached garage having a height of 5.17 meters, whereas section 4.1.15 permits a maximum height of 4.5 meters. and a detached garage with a ground floor area of 152.01 square meters, whereas section 4.1.15 permits a maximum ground floor area of 112 square meters, and subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. And two, that the proposed garage be substantially and proportionately in conformity with the dimensions as set out on the application and sketches submitted and approved by the committee. And three, pardon me, that the owner retain the professional services of a coastal engineer to conduct a hazard risk analysis, including mitigation, flood proofing, and recommendations if possible, and provide the report to the township. And four, that subject to a hazard risk analysis report determining that the risk can be mitigated, the appropriate zoning certificate and building permit, incorporating that the report's recommended mitigation service measures be obtained within 3 years of the date of decision from the township only after the committee's decision becomes final and binding. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you, everyone. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Our next application. Thank you. Our next application is minor variance application 825-06 for 2 Island 3300 in Go Home Bay. To the planner, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The subject property is a single ownership island on Georgian Bay with an area of 4 acres within the Go Home Bay coastal waterfront community. The lands are for the majority in their natural state, containing areas of mature vegetation, bald rock, and varying degrees of elevation. The property currently contains a detached dwelling, a sleeping cabin, a shed, and a freestanding deck and 2 docks. As the island is zoned Go Home Bay Shoreline Residential Island, in accordance with the 2014-75 zoning bylaw, the maximum projection of a dock and ramp is 15.1 meters. In accordance with the 91-19 zoning bylaw, the maximum length of a dock extending from the subject island is 15 meters. As there is no building permit on file, the applicant could not provide sufficient evidence of the dock existing at the projection of 23.2 meters prior to the passing of the 91-19 zoning bylaw. A minor variance is required for the reconstruction of the dock and ramp at a projection exceeding 15.1 meters. The proposed projection is 21.9 meters, where a projection of 23.2 meters currently exists, and whereas a projection of 15.1 meters is required. The proposed dock and ramp will project to the north side of the island within a small sheltered bay. The owners have noted that the sheltered bay is crucial for the safekeeping of their watercraft in the event of inclement weather. The nearby islands are owned and occupied by the owner's family members. These neighboring island owners have submitted letters in support of the variance. In terms of the neighboring amenity areas, the proposed dock and ramp will only be visible to this small cluster of islands. The nearshore area within the sheltered bay is shallow in depth. An increased projection of the dock and ramp is required to gain adequate water depth for the docking of watercraft. An objective of the Go Home Bay coastal waterfront community policies is to limit the number, length, and size of docks in the shoreline area with the intention of projecting the visual character of the shoreline. For clarification, the character of the Go Home Bay coastal waterfront community is a low-density, low-intensity wilderness cottage area. The proposed dock replacement will not alter the existing low-density, low-intensity development of the subject island and the surrounding islands. The proposed dock will project into the interior of the cluster of islands, not being within an area of narrow water bodies or a high rate of boat traffic. Further, the projection is understated by the small bay and protruding rock outcrops on the north shoreline of the island as shown on the overhead displayed. As a result, the dock will be recessed towards the interior of the island. The committee can either approve or deny the variance being requested. The committee may also defer the application to a later date if additional information is required to come to a decision. Planning staff have completed a detailed analysis of the variance to the zoning bylaw and are requesting and are recommending approval subject to the conditions. Thank you.
This application.
Yes, one letter was received from Kelly Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating she has no concerns with the application. 5 letters of support were received by Andrew Brands, Barbara Zimmerman, Eric Jackman, Charles and Shirley Valentine, and the Madawaska Club of Go Home Bay.
Microphone, please.
Please identify yourself with name and address.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Cartwright. I'm here representing the builder, Canadian Waterfront Services, as well as the applicants, Vidot and Redfern. I'm here to speak on any of the construction, or site conditions that aren't already displayed. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. Okay, we have a number of members of the public online. If you, can you raise your hand? Yeah, if any of the public that are online wish to address the committee, please raise your hand. And if you need some instruction on how to do that, we can certainly help you.
Currently, I just see Mr. Brands, who is one of the neighbors.
Okay. All right, Mr. Brands, we can see your hand. Please go ahead.
Lower hand or top?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Brands is my husband. I'm Pamela Redfern Brands, so I am one of the owners of the island with this request.
Okay, and did you have a comment for the committee?
I did not. I'm sorry. I just wanted to come into the group. I probably shouldn't have.
No, that's quite all right. And you're welcome to join and participate.
Thank you.
I also see a hand up from Member Graziano.
Thank you, and through your chair, and it's great to hear that the applicant is also present, because I do have a question. Again, referencing the GIS, I do see up until 2018, the dock was a single finger, relatively much shorter than it is in its current state of 2023. In 2013, the aerial photograph looked like there was a second finger, which likely was an attachment to the existing dock there. But I'm curious. I'm of the belief that if it can comply, then it should comply, and I'm wondering what is the intent of the extension? I understand we're coming shorter relative to what it is currently, but in 2018 and 2013, it looks like it was much shorter than it is in its current state. So I'm wondering if it is possible to comply, why do we need the extended dock?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your question. We've had the 2 docks there probably for about 26 years. We do have them moved in the winter. Mm-hmm. So there might be an aerial photograph at the time when one had been removed and the second one had not yet been removed.
Okay.
But we have had the use of both docks primarily because of the shallow water there.
Right, I do understand, and if I may, I can see, and thank you for the clarification. In the 2013 aerial, it looks like the L portion of the main dock, that is, if I can, facing westward, was brought into that inner harbor, that's that safer bay. But it does look like that dock within that space, or that protected bay, was much shorter in 2013 and again in 2018. But in 2023, it seems it was extended out, and it looks like that L shape on the westward dock, or the westward finger, was brought over to extend out in that safe bay there. So the question is, are you interchanging that additional add-on, what I'm going to assume is a floating dock, and connecting them depending on where you're mooring your boats at the time, or and if so, why not maintain the existing footprint as it is?
I'll just reiterate that we've had 2 long docks in the area where we're requesting that we replace the 2 long docks. So to your reference about 2013 and 2018, I believe we've had both of the docks there for the duration. My father, who was an engineer, I think put them both in the late 1990s.
Yes, perhaps you're not understanding my question. I do see both docks present. So yes, there's no question with respect to both docks being present. What I'm saying is that the dock that is within the protected or sheltered bay was significantly shorter up until the years between 2018 and 2023. And my question is, what is the intent? Why the need to extend beyond the allowable length?
You want me to do it?
Well, you're saying the protected area, that is the area that we're asking for this variance, correct?
If I could jump in, in the protected area, the dock that we have has been there since 1990, the extended one. It wasn't what you're seeing as an aerial photograph. I don't know when that was taken, but those docks have been there for quite some time.
I'm not able to tell who's speaking here.
That's Mr. Brands, Pam's husband.
So
I think
Andrew Brands.
Yes,
correct.
And is it Pamela Brands?
Yes, I'm sorry, Pamela Redfern Brands.
Okay, that's fine. It just said we need to keep a record, and it helps if I know who's speaking.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So just to clarify, the dock that we're talking about has been there since at least 1990, and the aerial photographs, I'm not sure when they were taken. Maybe if it was taken during the middle of the summer, you would show that the docks were there. If it was taken in either the cusp season or winter, then of course they would be moved. So there's for the members to answer his question, the docks, what we're looking for is actually it's a non-conforming use already.
Okay. And okay, is there something that your agent here might be able to answer?
Yeah, I think
Mr. Cartwright, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in respect to the first question, as far as why they're requesting to maintain the lengths, I can attest to, I took the photos in the fall, and it has to do with water depth. So more than half of that dock system, when it's floating out there, is within or less than 3 feet of water. So with the low water levels, it's imperative for the safety and also the mooring of their boats that they maintain that a little bit of extra length there so that the boats can maintain floating. That's the biggest request, I believe, for this, and it does have to do with the water level. So.
And of course, that water level fluctuates quite a bit over time.
Yeah, of course, it does fluctuate. So, during high water events, then like most people in Georgian Bay, they wouldn't have an issue. But because of the low water, this just gives them the opportunity that the dock can maintain and stay in that one space, and they can use it during high water and low water. It's also situated very well. It's, nobody can see it. It's in a protected area. We did look at options of moving the dock system, but history, shows that that's the best location for it in a protected manner. So.
And how much water depth do you have at the end of that dock at this point?
We did a depth test, and at the end of that dock is somewhere around the 4-foot mark. So it's not too bad, but like I said, as you start to move closer to shore, the water drops off significantly. They have rock outcroppings on either side as well, so it's almost very fitting for a small little protected area for them.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Matthews, you had a question? Okay, I'd ask you to wait then while we speak to Ms. Nicholson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification for the committee in relation to the pictures for CGIS. They are normally taken in the spring or the fall when the leaves are obviously less prominent. So in the case, especially of Georgian Bay, a lot of the cottage owners and homeowners actually remove their floating docks and put them in safer spaces to protect them from ice. So sometimes in the years may differ where the dock will be in place at its full length. Sometimes you'll see pieces of it sitting by. Sometimes there's just pieces that may be in a bay and an island that's not in the actual photo. So it's just for a little bit of clarification for your purposes.
Thank you for that. Member Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, in your report, it said that the maximum length of the dock is 15 meters. I thought it was 20 meters. Or is Go Home a little different than other parts?
Through the chair, yeah, you're correct. In the Go Home Bay Coastal Waterfront Community, it's shortened to 15.1 meters.
But right now what they're essentially doing is shortening it by a meter or so. I can fully appreciate my island is almost very similar design, and the water goes up and down. The water is on its way down right now. So you're going to need any extra length that you can possibly get. And I also appreciate that some people do have the ability to loosen their docks off from shore or even pull them up for the winter's time so they don't get damaged. So I wouldn't worry about 2013 GIS, quite frankly. So.
Okay, thank you. Member Jarvis, you had a question?
Really, I'm just going to add to the conversation and a question to the, not so much to the applicant, but our builder who's here. On the Georgian Bay is Member Matthews, and we know how much the water level can change. I'm more concerned, looking at that island and your overhead shot that you've kindly provided, is what's going to happen when the water goes up 2 meters, which is about, well, actually from where it is, probably 1.5 meters, but it looks to me like all that bedrock that's showing outside of the tree line is land that was probably flooded the last time we had high water, based on my experience. Is there going to be any capacity to be able to move that dock up the rocks if necessary?
Yeah, great question, Stephen. The clients, so just to reiterate or answer a couple other things too, the dock system, I mean, we've installed a lot of dock systems on Georgian Bay, and this system, you know, by all accounts is incredibly modest, you know, for what the clients are asking and what they have. The ramp system, you know, majority of dock systems that you would see would have a large shore deck portion on the shoreline, you know, a freestanding structure that the ramp connects to. The clients don't have this. They have a ramp with a sets of holes in the rock, and as the water level increases, the ramp is just pulled up to the sets of holes every year. Again, to reiterate the shape of the dock, or depending on how the photos were taken. I can attest to the fact, even with photos, site photos, those docks have always been joined together. Photos may have been taken when they were separated from the contractor who is in charge of summarizing and winterizing the system, but it is my opinion that those docks have always been joined together. You know, it doesn't look like they've been used for any other purposes. But to answer your question, Stephen, yes, the thought is that we would still use the same holes that are currently in the bedrock, and they do traverse up the rock. So when you're on site, you can see the water lines, the various water lines of different heights throughout Georgian Bay, and you can see the pre-existing holes actually, as well as a few steel pins that still remain from moving the dock up and down the rock shoreline. And our system would be identical to this. Just, you know, with a new ramp and a new style of dock. And yes, as the water moves up and as the ramp and dock system are moved up accordingly, the dock system actually maintains the same projection. As it moves up, it moves back further into shore to reach those various pins, and the dock system itself will just, you know, move into shore. So there's, even if the water goes up, it's not like the dock will be projecting any further out into the bay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Member Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Actually, my questions have just been answered by the agent, and questions by Member Jarvis. Thank you. I'm fine.
Thank you. And Member Schmidt, I see your hand.
I just wanted to share that, you know, based on where projection amounts could potentially be on this island, this is being selected in a location over the course of time to be drawn back in. If you look at the projection of that dock beyond the perimeter of that bay, it's extremely short. Like, visual impact from any body of water would seem very minimal to myself. And I think it's a perfect spot for the dock, and I I don't think this is a big ask. I support this application.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions or comments, I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A25-06 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 2 Island 3300 Georgian Bay to facilitate the construction of a dock as described below. And one is to permit a maximum dock projection of 21.9 meters, whereas section 4.1.13.2 allows a maximum projection of 15.1 meters. The above noted approvals are subject to the following conditions. Firstly, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. And 2, that the proposed dock be substantially and proportionally in conformity with the dimensions as set out on the application and sketches submitted and approved by the committee, and that the appropriate zoning certificate and building permit be obtained within 3 years from the date of the decision from the township only after the committee's decision becomes final and binding. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for participation and in the meeting. And we have one final resolution. It is moved by Member Matthews and seconded by Member Graziano. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn at 11:57 until April 11th, 2025 at 10 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the meeting is adjourned.
Have a good day, everyone.